So I grew up with an emotionally neglectful mom, and I basically was ignored as a child. And being a sensitive kid, I felt like I was never seen, and so that had such a negative impact in my life. But reflecting back on my life and kind of understanding this aspect of my life, I've come to realize there are a few, deeper spiritual lessons behind it that I've realized for myself. So I remember feeling unloved when I was a child. I remember always questioning why my mom didn't love me. It just felt like no matter what I did, I just couldn't get her to love me. And so I remember just experiencing, extreme sadness, depression, and all that as a child. When I look back at my childhood, I definitely didn't, have a happy one. I definitely don't remember feeling that way at all. And it didn't help either that my mom was always so resentful towards me. I felt like my existence was such an inconvenience to her. It wasn't until I got a bit older that I realized that I was a product of a failed relationship. And so she was basically stuck with me. And I guess, that just made her really resentful towards me. And she didn't hold back from showing it. I was just always, I basically learned that being invisible was much safer than for her to constantly be mad or angry at me and to be resentful towards me. And so that was kind of like, a way for me to feel safe was to be invisible. And having no emotional or mental support made me feel like I was on my own in this world. I felt like I had to learn everything on my own and do everything on my own, which ultimately I almost basically did. Besides like her taking care of my physical survival needs, she wasn't there for me emotionally or mentally, didn't really parent me or, give me any emotional support in any way. And so I was navigating like this whole world, on my own, and it just felt so scary. The world felt like a scary place for me. So I struggled a lot with anxiety and didn't even realize that I was struggling with anxiety for almost my whole life. And that I basically just had fears about almost everything, fears of doing anything new or unfamiliar. And so it really did make going through life a lot more challenging. Like I remember when I went to elementary school, that was like a whole new world that I experienced on my own, and I had no one to turn to, and whenever I did, it would always get shut down. And so I felt like, that was kind of one of the things I had to learn early on, was how to be responsible, how to take care of myself. And so even though that experience was painful and challenging, it actually created the foundation that would lead me to my spiritual awakening, because I'm a firm believer that pain and suffering and challenges in our life can be the catalyst to help us with our spiritual awakening, that we need something painful and challenging at times to wake us up. And so that was kind of the foundation, the environment that I grew up in, that helped me to lead me on a path to find ways to heal, to find ways to kind of overcome the experiences I had prior. So then that led me onto my healing process, right? I had to start doing the inner work. I had to deal with the grief, the pain, the anger even that I had towards her for not being the mom that I needed, and I had to let go of all my attachments as well, of, wishing that she would have been different, or wishing that we could have a relationship now or in the future, right? I had to let go of all those attachments and expectations from her. And that led me to realize that, what true forgiveness is, because I'm at a place now where I have a lot more inner peace around it. I am no longer as triggered by my mom. I do not feel all this like anger and resentment towards her. It's really taught me about true forgiveness. I think the realization of when I got to this point was realizing that she could still be who she is, and I did not get reactive anymore. I did not have a reaction. My ego did not get triggered by her anymore. And so that was a big sign of what true forgiveness was for me, where I realized that no matter what she did, no matter how selfish she may be, or how she doesn't care or whatever, or doesn't overtly show that she cares, that it didn't bother me anymore. I kind of let go of all of that, because I realized too that she's only so capable, right? Because I I understand that she is deeply unconscious and that she is identified with her ego right now, in this phase of her life. I don't know what the future will be like for her, but from watching a lot of movies about dysfunctional family members and stuff, I can say that in real life, it doesn't seem to be that way, that at the end of the last act, that they all of a sudden heal and realize that they have done wrong. I think in reality right now that if someone were to change like that, it'd have to be some sort of like divine intervention. But I understand where my mom is, at in her life, and that she is ran by her ego, and that's okay. I'm at peace with it. I'm at peace with my relationship with her, even though we are just acquaintances at best, like the way that we interact with each other. I'm not bothered by it anymore. I've let go of all the attachment I had to the relationship I wish I had with her and how it could have been, of course, when I watch movies and I see, other people's other mother-daughter relationships, the healthy positive ones that I see, sometimes I'll be like, oh, I missed out on that, but it's okay, because I've come to accept that this was kind of the path that I needed to go on, and that it really did teach me about forgiveness and to really be at peace with it. And so the other lesson that I've learned from having an emotionally neglectful mother is that family is an illusion. And I know this sounds very, very, out there, but I hope you kind of understand what I mean. But basically, at most, there really is just the human family. And I know that sounds, out of touch with reality or whatever. I don't know however you think of it. But basically, I feel like family is an illusion where we are given the family dynamic in our life to give us an opportunity to teach us about love, right? That it's much easier to deal with the ideas of love within a family dynamic than it is with a complete stranger. So on the bigger picture of there's only really the human family, that it's much easier than to not have to actually practice unconditional love with some stranger, right? It's easier to just be like, oh yeah, they're just some silly idiot, whatever, you move on. But in a family dynamic where they are much closer and that you grew up with, as a child, that it really is the opportunity to teach us about love, to teach us about forgiveness, to teach us about unconditional love, right? I've had to let go of the idea of the motherly, love that I needed as a child, because I've come to realize that it's much more grand than that, that unconditional love doesn't just come between mother and child, right? It's basically for everyone and anyone. But of course, at that level, you got to be pretty much a saint to kind of live into that level of unconditional love. But at least that's kind of the understanding that I seem to have now around it, that family is an illusion. But the reason we're given family is to teach us about love, to give us the opportunity to practice that and to kind of showcase that. It's much easier for me to find unconditional love towards my mom than it is for me for me towards a stranger, right? So I think that's why we have family dynamics for. And so for healthy families who have, where love comes easier for them, that's just their experience. Not everyone has the same experience in life, obviously. We all have different experiences because we all come here for different lessons. And so for whatever reason, I guess that was my lesson. These were my lessons that I needed to learn. Basically, that having an experience of pain and suffering can be the pathway to awakening. Not everyone has to wake up like that, but for whatever reason, that was just my path. And, having this experience of growing up with an emotionally neglectful mom really did teach me about forgiveness, about true forgiveness, and to understand the lesson around too that family is ultimately an illusion. It's really about the human family at most, but it's kind of harder to experience love that way. And so we're given the dynamic of family to teach us about love, to give us the opportunity to deepen our love or to grow our love in that kind of way. So I feel like this was the path that I had to be on, the experiences I needed to basically put me on the path of learning these spiritual lessons. So thanks so much for watching, and I will see you next time.